My name is Claire Johnson. I'm 67 years old, and tonight, as I sit alone in my Denver apartment on my birthday, I can't stop thinking about the moment I ruined my daughter's wedding. This empty room feels colder somehow, as if every choice I made that day is still hanging in the air around me. I thought I was doing the right thing. I really believed I was saving her from herself. But all I see now is that black dress I wore standing out like a shadow in a room full of white and blush pink. I can still hear the gasps when I stood up from my seat, the silence that followed when my words cut through the vows. I told her in front of everyone that if she went through with it, she was no longer my daughter. I didn't even wait to see her face after that. I just turned around and walked out as if I had won something. That memory has stayed with me all these years, sharper than anything else, replaying every time I sit at this little kitchen table and cut myself a slice of birthday cake. Tonight is no different. It's just me, a single candle, flickering, and the heavy weight of knowing I'll probably never hear her voice again. And still deep down, I wonder if I could have done anything differently, or if I was always meant to lose her. I wasn't always this bitter or so sure of my own righteousness. There was a time when all I cared about was giving Ellie the kind of life I never had. I grew up in a small town with nothing to my name, working 2 jobs just to escape and start nursing school. When I married Tom, it felt like everything was finally coming together. But life has a way of taking what you love and leaving you with the rest. Tom died in a car accident when Ellie was only 7. I remember holding her tiny hand at the hospital, trying to smile while telling her that Daddy had gone to heaven. That was the day I promised myself I'd protect her from every bad thing that could possibly happen, even if it meant making the decisions for her, even if it meant never letting her choose wrong. At first, it was small things. I picked out her clothes each morning, even when she started asking to wear something else. I signed her up for piano lessons because I thought it would teach her discipline, though she cried after every class and begged me to let her quit. I'd pat her head and tell her one day she'd thank me. And she always just nodded, even when her eyes got glossy with tears she didn't want me to see. By high school, she hardly argued anymore. I chose her classes, her summer jobs, even her friends. I told myself it was what a good mother did, guiding her toward the future she deserved. There was this one night I still see clearly when she came into my room holding a sketchbook. She said she'd drawn something she wanted me to see, something she was proud of. I barely looked up from my work papers and told her to save her hobbies for after she finished her college applications. She stood there for a moment before closing the book and walking out. I thought I was keeping her safe. I thought if I stayed strong and didn't let her make the same mistakes I did, she'd grow up grateful. But looking back now, I see that what I called love was really just control, dressed up to look like care. And every time she reached for me, I was already too busy planning the next step of her life to notice she just wanted her mother. The first time Ellie brought Jack home, I knew I didn't like him before he even opened his mouth. He wore a wrinkled button-down shirt and jeans, like he didn't care what impression he made, and his handshake was weak, his smile too easy. I could see right through boys like him, the kind who worked with their hands because they couldn't do anything better and thought charm was enough to get by in life. I asked what he did for work, already knowing I wouldn't approve of the answer. He said he was a mechanic and talked about engines like they were poetry, and all I could hear was the sound of Ellie throwing her education and potential away. He called me Mom like he was being polite, but it felt condescending, like he was laughing at the kind of life I'd worked so hard to give her. Ellie sat next to him the whole time, her hand resting on his knee, her eyes flashing every time I pressed him with another question. She didn't even try to hide her irritation, cutting me off when I brought up how hard it was to make a marriage work when only one person had ambition. Later that night, she told me I was being unfair, that he was kind and he loved her. I didn't say it out loud, but I knew love wasn't enough. Love didn't pay bills. Love didn't keep a roof over your head. Love didn't matter when you woke up one day and realized you'd tied yourself to someone who was dragging you down. She wouldn't see it, and I couldn't stop seeing it. And for the first time, she didn't just nod or walk away. She looked me straight in the eyes and said I didn't know everything. It didn't take long after that for Jack to propose. He didn't even ask for my blessing. Ellie came home one evening, glowing with a diamond on her finger, and before I could get a word in, she announced they were getting married in the spring. I stood there staring at her hand, wondering how she could look so proud of such a foolish choice. I told her she was rushing, that she didn't know what she was doing, that Jack was going to hold her back. She shot back that she didn't need my approval. That hurt more than I let her see, but I still couldn't bring myself to agree. Finally, she said, if I couldn't accept him, I didn't have to come at all. That was the moment I felt something shift. She thought she could cut me out of the most important day of her life, but I wasn't about to let her make such a mistake without at least trying to stop it. So I bought a dress. Not the kind of soft pastel dress a mother of the bride wears. Black. Simple. Like mourning. I wanted her to know from the second she saw me sitting there what I thought about all of this. Every thread of that dress felt like a warning. I told myself I was doing the right thing, that I'd make her see reason even if it humiliated her. And as I zipped up that black dress the morning of her wedding, I swore to myself I would not let my daughter throw her life away without hearing me say one last time that she was wrong. The church was full that afternoon, every pew lined with friends and family leaning in to watch her walk down the aisle. There were soft white roses draped over every chair and sunlight streaming through the stained glass catching the gold in her hair. Ellie looked radiant in her dress, her smile so wide it almost hurt to see, as if nothing in the world could touch her happiness. I sat near the front, my black dress heavy against my skin, my hands clutched tight in my lap. Every detail of the ceremony felt like it was mocking me, the way people whispered about how beautiful everything was, how lucky she was. I didn't hear a word of the vows. All I could think about was how quickly this would all come apart if she went through with it. When the pastor asked if anyone objected, the room fell quiet, except for the faint shuffle of feet and the nervous laugh of someone in the back. My breath caught in my chest. Then I stood up my chair, scraping loudly against the floor, and everyone turned to look. I told her she was making a mistake, that she'd regret this, that if she married him, she would no longer have a mother. My voice shook, but I made sure every word was clear, echoing off the walls. The guests froze, their smiles gone, staring at me like they didn't know what to say. Ellie's eyes filled with tears before I even finished. Her lips trembled, and she reached for Jack's hand like he was the only thing keeping her standing. The silence in the church was suffocating all those people watching us, as if this were some scene they'd paid to see. She didn't say a word back. She just stared at me, her face pale and wet with tears, until finally she turned and buried her face in his chest. I stood there a moment longer, feeling the weight of everyone's judgment pressing down on me, and then I turned and walked out, leaving her there with all those flowers and all those people and all of that happiness I couldn't stand to watch anymore. I went home that night, sure she would call me. I told myself she just needed a little time to cool off, that she would realize I was only trying to save her from herself. I left my phone on the nightstand, the screen glowing through the dark, waiting for her name to appear. The next morning, it was still silent. So I called her instead, and it rang until her voicemail picked up. I didn't leave a message, figuring I'd try again later when she was ready to talk. Days turned into weeks, and each time I dialed her number, it felt a little harder to breathe when she didn't answer. I sent her texts on her birthday, on Thanksgiving, on Christmas. Short little things like "I miss you" and "hope you're well," but the only thing that ever came back was silence. The holidays became unbearable after that. I stopped putting up the tree. I stopped cooking for anyone but myself. I sat at the same kitchen table every year with a plate of food and a single candle staring at the empty chair across from me. Sometimes I'd scroll through old photos on my phone just to hear the sound of her laugh in my head again. I'd watch videos of her as a little girl twirling in the yard or blowing out her own candles and wonder if she even remembered who I used to be before that day. By spring, I stopped calling. Not because I didn't want to hear her voice, but because I couldn't take hearing nothing anymore. Every message I sent just reminded me she'd already made her choice. And every time the holidays came around, it felt like she was erasing me a little more. It happened on a quiet Tuesday night while I was flipping through channels just to fill the silence. I stopped when I saw a familiar face on the local news, and for a second, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But there she was, standing in front of a podium, in a sleek navy suit, a microphone clipped to her collar, and a bright smile on her face. The headline at the bottom of the screen read Ellie Miller, Vice President of Operations, announcing a new community initiative. I froze, staring at the name they gave her, feeling the weight of it sink in. Miller, not Johnson. She had taken his name. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and she carried herself with this quiet confidence I didn't recognize. The camera panned to her husband, standing just behind her, and two little children sitting in the front row, clapping for their mother. The boy couldn't have been more than 5. The little girl was maybe 3, clinging to her father's leg. They all looked so proud of her. Happy. Like she'd built a life full of everything I thought she'd never find with him. I couldn't look away even though every second cut deeper. She thanked her team. She thanked her husband, calling him her rock. She smiled down at her kids and said they were the reason she worked so hard. Not once did she even glance at the camera like she knew I might be watching. I sat there on the couch, the remote slipping from my hand, and just watched the rest of the segment in silence. When it was over, the anchor moved on to something else, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. When the room finally came back into focus, I reached for my phone and opened my contacts. Her name was still there. I stared at it for what felt like forever, my thumb hovering over the call button. But something stopped me. She didn't need me anymore. That much was clear. She had a husband who stood by her, and 2 children who adored her, and a career she'd built without a single ounce of my approval. I put the phone down and pressed my palms to my face, and for the first time in years I cried like a child. Not the kind of tears that come quick and burn out. The kind that ache all the way down to your bones, the kind that leave you gasping for air between sobs. I cried for all the years I wasted thinking I knew what was best. I cried for every time she'd reached for my hand and I'd pulled away. I cried because she had become everything I wanted for her, and she'd done it without me. The house felt so quiet after that, almost cruel in how empty it seemed. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water just to have something to do with my hands. But nothing I did could drown out the truth I'd finally let in. She had lived the life she deserved. She had loved and been loved and grown into someone strong and sure. And I had no place in it anymore. I stood by the window and watched the city lights flicker far off in the distance, wondering if she was tucking her children into bed at that very moment. I wondered if she thought of me when she closed her eyes at night, or if I was nothing more to her than a shadow she'd finally outrun. That thought stayed with me long after the tears dried. I realized then that what I feared most had already happened. She had moved on. And all I had left was the memory of who we used to be back when she was still my little girl. When I sit here now and look back at it all, I see just how many little cuts I left on her heart without even realizing. I thought I was loving her the right way, by steering her, by keeping her on the path I believed was best. But what I really did was clip her wings every time she tried to fly on her own. I told myself that picking her clothes and her classes and her friends was a kindness, that it kept her safe from disappointment. I told myself that dismissing her dreams was for her own good, that hobbies and silly crushes would only distract her from her future. I told myself that saying no was love even when all she wanted to hear was yes. I can still see her face on the nights she stood in my doorway with that sketchbook or a ribbon she won, or just a story she was proud to tell me. And I can still feel how quickly I turned her away with a wave of my hand or a tired sigh, too busy with my own worries to see hers. Every time she tried to share herself with me, I shut her down. Even on her wedding day, I thought I was protecting her, standing up and telling her she would no longer have a mother if she married him felt like the ultimate sacrifice, as if I was throwing myself in front of her happiness to save her. But what I was really doing was making sure she'd never turn back to me again. And now she never will. If you're listening to this, I want you to take one thing from my story. Please don't wait until it's too late to tell the people you love that you see them, that you're proud of them, that you love them just as they are. Don't mistake control for care or silence for strength. If your child brings you something they're proud of, set down your phone and look them in the eyes. If they tell you they've fallen in love, even if you're scared, even if you think it's wrong, find a way to listen before you speak. If they choose a path you don't understand, walk beside them anyway. Because one day they might choose to walk it alone without you. The truth is, you don't get a second chance at this. I thought I'd have time to fix it, to call her, to explain myself. But time runs out faster than you think. Tonight, my phone sits quiet beside me, and I know it won't ring. I know she's not thinking of me the way I'm thinking of her. And I have to live with the choices I made. So tell them you love them. Tell them you're proud. Even if it's awkward, even if it feels hard. Say it now while you still can, before the silence becomes permanent, and all you have left are the memories of everything you could have said but didn't.